mosaics, and then you'll have my 4 plop, plop, plop bits of history. It's not just mine, but I find that it's helpful to have these images. And we go there and back and forth. There's no point in crossing the street 3 times. We come in here partly for the architecture. There is a tower, which we'll get a quick glimpse of in a few moments, around the back, which is where our government has actually been meeting. We could see it from down by the Reformation Wall. We look up. Which was built in the 1440s, and it's where the government has been sitting ever since. In Calvin's day, they built this ramp here, which is continuous, that gives access to all the chambers of this building, which has been added onto and rebuilt and so on up through the end of the 18th century. The most modern part is this peristyle. So, kind of a collage. We also come in here, well, first of all, our government meets that is to say, the parliament for the city, municipal, as well as the council for the canton. Geneva is a state, like Minnesota, and its government is here, as well as the municipal government of the city of Geneva. And this is, they use this big chamber alternately. These are 2 different bodies. They meet from 5 o'clock throughout the evening. Politics is not a career here. You're a lawyer or a gardener or a teacher or a painter or whatever, and you may be elected, and then you meet up here. The actual governing councils, we have a council of 5, which run the municipalities, and rather like our federal government. Have we talked about having federal government? No.
Not really at all.
This is the modern Switzerland that was featured. What do you know who the president is of Switzerland? Any Swiss is embarrassed. They don't know, and they'll make a few gifts. And finally they'll say,
"Are we off the hook then?"
Doesn't matter anyway. You're off the hook. You go the wrong way on a one-way street in a place he's not supposed to be, unless you're a resident. Yeah, full throttle. That's called gamesmanship or something. Anyway, the federal government, they didn't write a constitution until 1848. And when were having some wars between these cantons who had been kind of accumulating, a bit American style. They started with 3, they went to 5, 8, 13, so on. Time of Napoleon, they were about 18, and when Napoleon was defeated, finally, Geneva, Neuchâtel, and the Valais, where Zermatt is, joined. So Switzerland has been the same shape, but only since 1815. So then they were a loose federation of states. They met 3 or 4 times a year. Ambassadors from each of these states would go, and they'd meet and they'd talk about mutual concerns. They'd already been declared neutral in 1515, so the war wasn't an issue. And but there got to be a lot of tension between the Catholic and the Protestant cantons, to the point where it became a battle. And in fact, we didn't walk through the Place Neuve, we should have probably, but maybe in your bus you did.
They did hear about Zwingli, and they actually watched this DVD about Zwingli and the Protestant Catholic.
By the square outside the park where the opera house and so on.
We drove through it.
Okay. Well, anyway, there's an opera house and a conservatoire of music, and there's a man on a horse who was the man who put down in 5 days our first general. We have compulsory military service and no generals. We appoint one. Parliament appoints one when there's a crisis. We've had 4. Him, Dufour, to put down this war against the Sonderbund, who were the Catholic canton. There was a lot of tension. At that time, they decided they needed a constitution. Whose constitution did they copy? U.S.
Yes. Oh.
But before we get too pumped up about that, the principles of our constitution come from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who got a lot of his bright ideas right on down through the Reformation. Because one thing I usually bring up, or it comes up somewhere, either between the wall and the cathedral, that this idea of the Reform, that you had a direct relationship with God through the mediation of Jesus Christ, rather than through all these levels of hierarchies of priests and so on. The human element gone, God is watching you directly. Suddenly you better behave. You better, live the good and righteous life and become responsible and accountable for yourself. This was a new burden, really, that was put on the human being at that time. And certainly Rousseau, having been brought up here, had this in his mind, and he was very much for liberty. We're all born equal in the eyes of God. We're all born equal with equal opportunities. and that we are born innocent, the society that messes us up, and so on, the whole the child savage and all that kind of. Anyway, that is Rousseau, and it is he who came up with this, or who wrote, which we, the Americans writing the Constitution, understood this whole idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which actually came from another lawyer before him named Borlamaki, and he was the one who actually used that phrase, the pursuit of happiness. Anyway, that which went into our Constitution, the Swiss reabsorbed that, and the thing is different though, is they made the executive body is elected by Parliament. It's seven members are elected by Parliament for 4-year terms, and they can have 2 terms, and at that point they take turns on a rotation basis being president of the federation. So we're not elected directly by the people, which means there's none of this personality stuff. Everybody, it's not just the U.S., but France and Germany and Asian countries and so on, that human being, and this whole thing of having to be charismatic. Some of our leaders are really, I mean, just be honest, some of them are kind of ugly and not terribly presentable, but they've got the politics together. And we sometimes have this the president has to speak about a new bill that's up, and you think, good heavens, couldn't we do better than that? But it's not that he isn't a good leader. I mean, no, he's maybe not a leader, but he's a good politician. They are terrified of putting too much power in the hands of any one person.
That's
such
good.
as we have no generals, we have committees of colonels, and when there's a crisis, Parliament appoints a general. And the crisis is over, no more general, off comes the strike, and it goes back to being a lowly thing. So that for the government. And municipal government and cantonal governments are different in each one. This federation, there's a lot of variety and diversity, but our system is that we have this grand council, as they call one council, and a committee of 7 who run the canton, and they take turns being the president of that council, which is exactly what it is. He's not the governor. He's that level. I think if a governor of Minnesota comes to visit, he would be the one to meet them. But his authority is not like that of a governor. He literally presides over the group of 7. He would break a tie. He would be the one who speaks for the council that year, but otherwise, and then he passes the baton the next year. The same thing in the municipal, it's a committee of 5, and they take turns being mayor.
You like politics, I think.
That's it.
Political science major, maybe.
Yeah, well, it works. And we have elections going on right now. We have the elections for the parliament, and now we have the elections for the members of the council of state. They're turning over. The council of state that is the 7 who run the county. And Geneva is still known literally because it was once an independent republic, and so it is still known as the state and the Republic of Geneva. This means it's really a canton of Switzerland, but it's not the term German. It's funny. Anyway, the other reason we come to know about government is, this is chapter 4 we're starting to go back, is this Alabama word, which is the name of the room inside, which is, there's a sort of reception room with the paintings that were relevant, and then you go into the next one, which is the Alabama room. And it has its name because of the case of, anybody here know Civil War history? I've already given a big clue. What was the Alabama? What was the Alabama? Was, not is. Oh, you know. I know you know.
I know, but I can't say.
No, you can't say. Well, you can now.
It's a ship.
It's a ship.
Was.
Yes, it was a ship. Well, it's still there. It's still down at the bottom of the English Channel. During the Civil War, the beginning of the Civil War, the United States Navy obviously belonged to the North. And the South had not really very much. Now, some of us maybe have learned about the Merrimack and the Monitor and so on, but they had nothing else. Well, England, who ruled Britain, who ruled the waves at the time, was only too happy to help. And actually, it wasn't the government directly, it was more privateers. But anyway, they outfitted ships that fought on the side of the South with a kind of tacit acceptance by the British. And they did a lot of damage, and they sank a lot of ships. They took some into bondage, and it was the Alabama who won. They gave them these Confederate names. The Alabama who won first prize, 67 ships, of which I think I understand, I have a book like this, but something like 8 were taken into bondage, and the rest were sunk. They'd tell the crew to get off, and boom. And when the war was over, I feel like they prolonged it a lot. They ran the embargo on the East Coast. They also ran all over the world. The Alabama was in the Indian Ocean, among other things, sinking northern ships wherever they could. And so the war is over. America declared yet another war on Britain, and everybody was exhausted and tired. We all read Gone with the Wind. We know how bad it was. And so some Swiss suggested arbitration. Yes, good idea. They met in this room here, now known as the Alabama Room. The tribunal ruled in favor of the Americans, and what's really important is the British paid. They paid something like $25 million, which in 1872 was a lot of money. Now, is this enlightened self-interest? Why did they do this? They needed the cotton because their mills were running dry. This is when Egyptian Indian cotton began to come on the market. They wanted tobacco and they wanted cane sugar and things of that nature that they'd gotten used to. And somebody telling me about this one in one of my lectures was saying, and they gambled, they bet that the South would win for some reason. Maybe they liked that lifestyle better. But anyway, they made a mistake. And so it's just paid off. Anyway, what's important is that this went into the annals of legal history as the first case of successful international arbitration. And I'm told that if you study law, especially maritime law, anywhere, you will study this case. And Woodrow Wilson was a lawyer. He was also a Presbyterian. And he certainly knew about the other thing that I'm going to tell you about is the founding of the Red Cross, which the first convention was signed in here. And he certainly knew all that history. And so therefore he is lauded in magnitude really in this city as the man who brought the modern Geneva to life.
Woodrow Wilson.
Because he knew of it. And as you drove along, probably along the shore coming in, you went by a big pink building.
No, we took a right before that.
Ah, okay.
The Place des Nations.
Right, but then how did you get to across? Did you not go along the water?
A whole bunch of stuff. Went past Rue de Vermont. But,
oh, okay.
And then behind the train station, kind of one-way streets and left turns. And,
No.
But
Anyway, maybe if you're lucky, you'll get to drive on the lake. It goes both ways. There is a building that was a hotel, actually, which is a pinkish color, and it says on it, Palais Wilson. The name of that drive is Key Wilson. There's a Wilson Library, a Wilson Monument. Wilson is everywhere because really he is the man who made the modern Geneva. Now, and he knew...
That's their last name. They're all liking this.
Oh, your name's Wilson. Oh, well.
Oh, gosh, you have to keep a family photo.
Hotel Wilson. Yeah.
Our hotel.
Yeah, I'm sure. If you walk in and act like you absolutely are a relative, they'll give you. I doubt they'll give you a room, 1,000 francs. But anyway, it was something that was known. The Red Cross is another thing. I'm sure you probably did see the museum. And
we did see that, yes. That's one thing, absolutely.
Brand new museum. I mean, they had a museum. It wasn't all that old. It was, the cornerstone was laid by Nancy Reagan and Raisa Gorbachev back in the 80s. But they gave it a makeover, and it's really a very, very interesting, touching experience to go there about the whole humanitarian outreach of Geneva. Opposite the UN and opposite a hotel school. And to me, I love that square usually the bus is going too fast. But anyways, this is where Switzerland comes together. The hospitality in the hotel school, the politics, the UN, and the humanitarian side of the Red Cross.
I think this is humanitarian here.
Is this humanitarian?
Yeah, it's the hustle. Huh? It's the hustle.
Oh.
They'll love you in Paris.
Oh, yeah. No.
Why don't we mosey? Because I'm talking about time.
Okay. Right. Time is fine. Time is fine. But just to mention that the Red Cross was, it was somebody named Henry Dunant who was a businessman. He was trying to get some French support for something he was doing in Algeria. And he heard that Napoleon III, not Bonaparte, was in the north of Italy helping the Italians push the Habsburgs, the Austrians, out. And he went to just see this man and try to get the French support. And he came upon this horrible, horrible battle. And it was very, very hot, and people were dehydrated. And there was no kind of first aid whatsoever organized. So he organized. He was appalled. A Swiss, neutral. He'd never seen a battle in his life. He was horrified. So he organized himself with some of his colleagues to get people literally pulled into cool places, not discotheques, but places like cloisters and churches and palaces where it was cooler, get them potable drinking water, and take their names. Very important part of the Red Cross work still today, tracing refugees and wounded and children separated from families and so on. He came back, wrote about it, and very quickly got together a committee, and if you saw it, it says ICRC, which means International Committee of the Red Cross, to look after the humanitarian disaster of wars. There's now also the Federation of Red Cross Societies, which means the American Red Cross, the British Red Cross, the Swiss, all belong to that federation, which looks more after natural catastrophes, famines, floods, and that.
Right.
Whereas this one is more for man-made catastrophes and victims of war. Anyway, that was founded in 1863, and the first convention was signed then in this room, which is the Alabama room. And in that room are memorabilia from that. There's these photographers, so we have paintings of all these people, sitting at the table and signing things and so on, and all their signatures below. There's a model of the Liberty Bell. There's a model of, there's a plow that's made out of Union and Confederate swords. There's a painting
Swords to plowshares.
There's a painting of, also of the Red Cross, the people who signed the Red Cross Convention. Anyway, it's a room that's rarely open. They use it. It's a nice little conference room. And there's a couple of holidays during the year when they have open